Hey, what's up everybody? It's Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome to another edition of Track Walk in MX Simulator. Today, we're going to be playing the Glen Helen amateur track, created by JGMTbike, another awesome creation by the man, the myth, the legend, JGMX SX Combos. His tracks are really fun. He always does a really good job, and these tracks are actually, or this track and a couple other tracks that he made recently were actually used as like regional qualifiers for the Loretta Lynn's Amateur National Championship that's happening in MX Simulator. I'm sure there's info about it somewhere on the forum, so I'll try to remember to post a link to that in the description of this video. But I actually had someone request that I play this track for a track walk, and I figured it was a good idea because, well, Glen Helen's probably, I call it my home track. It's really not that close to me. It's probably about an hour and a half drive, maybe a touch longer, which, I mean, is close, but when you live in Southern California, hour and a half is kind of pretty far for a track. Like Paula is much closer to me, for example, maybe about 35 minutes away from me is Paula. So Glen Helen is, kind of a good drive comparatively to some other tracks in SoCal. However, this is definitely the track that in my lifetime of racing and riding dirt bikes that I have probably spent the most time at. It's definitely the track that I raced the most growing up and into my adult years. Trying to remember the last time I raced at Glen Helen. It was probably a couple years ago now. But yeah, never anything really special. I didn't race regionals or qualifiers or anything special like that. Never actually even done REM Saturday motocross, which I'm a little bit disappointed in myself for that. But I've done some like little local stuff. Been to Day in the Dirt there before, and yeah, I feel like I know this track so well, just like going around. I know the venue really well because I've camped there, I don't know, probably 10 times for races that I've done there and stuff like that. So definitely what I would consider my home track, and cool to see it in this amateur day version, which is kind of roughly the pro track with a couple things mixed in. It doesn't go into the back canyon before what used to be called Yamaha Hill, which I'll talk about that when I get to that. I already went through it once, but when I get there again, I'll talk about it. But it's mainly a recreation of this year's national track with, just subtle changes here and there, toned down some jumps to make it not as gnarly. Because it's an amateur track, it's supposed to be a little bit toned down, not crazy so, because they're still supposed to challenge some of the top A-class riders in the nation that are trying to qualify for Loretta Lynn's IRL. And I don't remember if it's an actual rendition of the regional track that was used or not for this year's Loretta Lynn's regional, but this is at least the JGMT version, and I like it. This is like the current status of Glen Helen and the way that it flows and everything. I'm not a huge fan of it, I guess. Like the first part of this here where it goes through Talladega then comes up the Short Chute Hill I like, but I don't like when it goes straight up to the top of Mount St. Helens up the back like this before. It's just not as appealing to me as going down and then back up the straight part of Mount St. Helens. And might as well talk about this in this video now. Mount St. Helens I've referred to in this game when I play this track, or in any game that has this track in it, over and over again, and I've had a couple people ask, why do I keep calling it Mount St. Helens? Mount St. Helens is in Washington State. It's actually in a real life volcano in Washington State, also a mountain. But Mount St. Helens is the nickname of the uphill, the really tall uphill that you go up and down in the middle of the track there. It normally has the American flag up at the top of it. It's called Mount St. Helens because it's Glen Helen, so you take the Helen from that and you have a tall hill, so they called it Mount St. Helens. It's just, it's the same thing as Gravity Cavity at Unadilla, or Mount Martin at Millville. or any number of these, you know, nicknames that you have for hills. It's just a name that they came up with. So I know that the volcano in Washington State is not what I'm talking about here. It's just the name of the hill. But I lost track of where I was going. Oh yeah, Mount St. Helens. What they used to do, maybe like 10, maybe even more so than 10 years ago, was come down the Short Chute Hill before you come back up Mount St. Helens, and the Short Chute Hill, sometimes called Showy Hill, is the little uphill after you go Talladega, come down, and then go back up the Short Chute Hill, or Showy Hill. And then normally you would turn around and come back down on the left side of the, you know, as I go up here. This is like the normal way up Mount St. Helens, and normally it would go all the way up to the top, but in this version it doesn't, and in the National this year it didn't either. And then this would be coming down the Short Chute Hill, and so I like when it comes down the Short Chute Hill, and I like when it goes straight on from this bridge and ends up maybe in this area, or even all the way almost to the finish line jump, and then turns around and you get a big run to go up the hill. I don't like this new wave, you know, Mount St. Helens that they're doing with these rollers into it. It used to be so cool where, like the National, they would have a big run up to it, no rollers in the way, you just get tons of speed, and it was almost like a freeway just going uphill, but it was a really steep hill, so it was really cool to see these guys get this massive run at it and just plow up the hill. And they haven't done that in years. I can't remember the last time that they had it go all the way that far past the bottom of the hill and then turned around and went straight back up like it did. So I like that version of Glen Helen a little bit better. I also like when they use the REM track, which is, I'll talk about that when I get to it, but the REM track used to be featured on the track from like 2000 and... I mean, they kind of always hit the REM track, but like going in more depth to the REM track used to be featured on the track back in like 2000, I think 5 or 2004 was maybe the first year that they started doing it. And then they stopped going back there in 2010, which I think was the last year they had a national at Glen Helen. No, I'm sorry, 2009 they stopped. That was the last year that they went back there, because then they went to Paula for 2 years and then Elsinore for a couple years before coming back to Glen Helen in 14, I believe. But the REM track added so much more depth to the track, and obviously they can't go back there for TV reasons because it makes the lap too long, and it makes the TV feed have to go really far up into the hill. But this is heading towards the REM track now, where you go out of the main area of the track, and then the REM track is back up in here. They have Saturday motocross races here. I've raced the REM track a ton of times in my life as well. I liked it when they went back there and they used to come back up over the hill that's right behind me right now. I don't know, just a couple things I'm pointing out about old versions of the Glen Helen track that I like versus what they do now. And I don't dislike this version, or the new track that they have. I think that there's a couple things on it that they overdo, namely adding too many big jumps. The terrain that they have at Glen Helen is epic. They have so much up and down and hills and stuff that they could play with and make just a really epic motocross track, but for some reason they decide, let's use a lot of the flat ground down here and do back and forth, and then build huge tabletops, and then they have the huge uphill triple into the back. And I've talked about it before, but to me that's not motocross, that's supercross and belongs indoors. So I think that they should, you know, for nationals, tone it down a little bit, make it so that it's hills and off cambers and, you know, real motocross type obstacles instead of huge jumps, which honestly a lot of the riders complain about anyway, because you have to hit some of the jumps so fast and kind of blind on this track that it's a little sketchy sometimes, and I would have to agree with them. I've never actually hit that uphill triple going into the back. I've hit it when it was the smaller little like triple tabletop that then went into the other Talladega back there. You might remember Grant sliding around underneath Cooper Webb, battling for the lead at the MXGP of the USA back in 2015. That was like the other Talladega. They actually called it something different. It might have been like the Daytona corner or something. But they used to have a little uphill triple back in that corner, and that one I've jumped before, but that one it wasn't even that big when I jumped it. And even that I was like, oh, man, why? You have such a huge drive coming down the hill, to hit that thing, and then you have to judge the speed, and it's, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me. Keep the big jumps to the Supercross type tracks, which are the Milestones and the Parises and stuff like that in Southern California. Glen Helen has way too good of a natural terrain to build these huge jumps on, but I don't know, Jody Weisel just loves to run with it and make whatever the heck he thinks is cool, which most of the time isn't, so that is what it is, I guess. But yeah, Glen Helen, amateur track, cool creation, JGMTbike, love what he does, great work, been an awesome addition to the community, building all this cool stuff and helping out this year, obviously, with the Loretta Lynn's Amateur National Championship, getting all the regionals set up, and then I think he's actually helping build the track this year too, but again, I'm not 100% sure on that, so I'll try to link the thread, remember that, and I'll throw down one more lap here. I'll try to do a couple cool things, a couple big whipper tails or whatever I can maybe do. Oh, almost lost it. It's actually kind of funny when Glen Helen came back on the schedule and was built in MX Simulator by Barrington the first year it was back. He actually included a huge transfer. If you go back to the first, I'm thinking it was maybe 2015 now, but 2015 Glen Helen National and MX Simulator built by Barrington. He built a really huge transfer on the REM track that's kind of hidden. Like, you have to go find it. It's a little like Easter egg jump that I thought was pretty cool of him to do. Talked before about when guys build tracks like this, I like when they include little kind of fun hidden mementos that you can go find off the track. I call them Easter eggs, but I guess they're just more or less little like discoverables that are neat to include. That was a cool one for Barrington to include, but very clearly JGMTbike on this track here. Oop, too much steez. He was just trying to keep the track as light on the computer as it could be, not have too many, you know, computer intensive objects and hills and stuff that were unnecessary there. So got the nearby scenery good and all that business, but didn't want to overdo it with too much. And honestly, everybody I feel like sees Glen Helen on either videos of guys riding it on Pro Day or obviously during the National. But I mean, I've been to Glen Helen when very few people have been there, and I've camped there when very few people have been there as well. And it really doesn't look too different than what you're looking at here. There's a couple other buildings that Bike doesn't have on here. There's a little clubhouse up by the REM track. There's a new, I think it's called the Troy Lee Designs Museum or something like that, that's right by the starting gate that's also there now, but I don't think he included it on this track. There's a little motorcycle walk of fame, and there's actually a really cool statue right behind the grandstands that are off to the left there. Oh yeah, I did include the museum. But a statue behind the grandstands that are right next to the finish line jump that points, it has these like rustic arrows and the names of several tracks, and it points in the direction that track is and lists how many miles away it is. So I think like one of the farthest tracks is Southwick. It lists, or you know, on there it says like MX338, and it lists it as 3,200 or so miles away. It's really cool, like, you know. And then like the nearest one, I think it shows Carlsbad race, like it says Carlsbad RIP, and that one's of course only like 60 miles away from Glen Helen. It's just a cool little statue. I should take a picture of it next time I'm there if I can remember, and maybe post it up on our Instagram. I'm sure I'll be back at Glen Helen sometime soon. Seem like I go there not as much as I used to, but maybe a couple times a year. Actually, one story that I wanted to talk about with Glen Helen on the mind is my brother actually did the 6-hour race here one year. They have a 6, a 12, and a 24-hour race at Glen Helen, and the 6-hour race part is cool. He did it on a 125, but his teammate, because you get 2 teammates to have a team of 3 riders in the 6-hour, his teammate was Trevor Bell, and the Bell name, of course, maybe rings a bell to modern fans as the Zach and Chase Bell family, but this is actually Trevor Bell, Mike Bell's son. And Mike Bell was the 1980 Supercross champion, Mike Too Tall Bell. And my brother was teammates with Trevor Bell, and they raced at 125 and finished somewhere like 6th or 7th, I believe, in the 125 class that year. And They're teammates with one of my dad's friends' sons as well, and it was a cool little team together. I got to meet Mike Bell back then too. It was 16 years ago now maybe that this happened. So my brother would have been, he's 33 now, so he'd have been 17 I think when he raced that. Sounds about right. And yeah, got to meet Mike Bell, hang out in his motorhome while my brother raced with his son, and it was a cool experience. It was unique to hang out with the Bell family. So that's a cool little interesting ending story, I feel like, to this video on a cool little interesting fun track by JGMTbike. So I thank you guys for watching another edition of Track Walk here in MX Simulator. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, please hit me up in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to answer anything that you guys ask. And keep watching our videos. I really appreciate all the support. I'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.